Welcome to the Payroll Podcast with your host, Nick Day of JGA Recruitment, specialist payroll recruiters.
Hello and welcome to the Payroll Podcast. I am Nick Day from James Gray Associates, specialist payroll recruiters, and I am joined today by Gilles Champagne, a specialist global payroll professional with a particular skill in relation to Canadian payroll. We're going to find out a little bit more about that in just a moment. But first of all, Gilles, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about your background in payroll. What's led you to become principal consultant for implementing Canadian payrolls as you do now? But tell us a little bit about your payroll journey.
Payroll being what it is, joined payroll as a payroll supervisor, knowing nothing about payroll.
Sure.
At the end of the year. So you get dumped in basically, being responsible for year end and all of everything that goes along with that, not knowing anything. So I attached myself to the Canadian Payroll Association, grew through their knowledge, and became a volunteer. And when you become a volunteer with a fledgling organization 40 years ago, you become a member. And so I grew through, became chairman of the board eventually. I've tried to back away a little bit, but when you've got payroll in the blood, you sort of never leave. So about 8 years ago, I set up a consultancy. There was a niche that I thought was not well served, and it's managing Canadian payrolls from abroad.
Sure,
so managing
that's right.
payrolls from outside of Canada. It's hard enough managing in country. I just felt for all of these poor payroll professionals all over the world who are managing Canadian payroll without having the hands-on knowledge of being able to do it.
Sure.
So I basically set that up, and it's been a great ride so far.
And it's quite a niche skill, but so people are clear. If I was running a UK payroll operation and I had a payroll that came, my business grew or inquired a Canadian payroll, exactly. Your specialist skill is implementing Canadian payrolls for companies based outside of Canada.
Correct. So it's the compliance part especially.
Sure.
So it can go from registering to setting up your HR policies, if you're setting up from scratch, not acquiring, into actually setting up the actual payroll. And it's platform independent. I don't run,
yeah, sure.
So it's just platform independent. So making sure you're compliant, and that's basically what you need to do.
So what's the biggest Canadian compliance challenge that the Canadian Payroll Association or Canadian payroll businesses, if you like, are struggling with at the moment?
If you're a national entity in Canada, you have to abide by 200 laws and regulations.
Wow. Okay.
And so keeping up with that is the utmost challenge because they are forever evolving. A change of government, federal or provincial, we have 14 entities to deal with, one
Sure.
federal government and 13 provincial or territorial governments. Whenever there's a change of government, usually liberal to conservative, they will very often go and change the employment standards, which means you have a more liberal vacation policy or you have a little less liberal vacation policy. And so minimum rates of pay will change. Vacation allowances will change. New taxes will come up. And so keeping on top of that is a challenge, even for us in Canada.
Sure. So is this your first time to Congress? Are you, okay, tell us a little about your reasons for coming and your experience of Congress so far.
I'm part of the Global Payroll Management Institute.
Sure.
Being a non-American kind of thing. But I've been associated, because I was associated with the Canadian Payroll Association, I've been around the APA for like 25 years.
Wow, okay.
And so I haven't come every year, but my interest here now being sort of the lone non-American on the APA's special, or the task force for global payroll issues, I basically decided that I should participate in Congress simply because there is a need. If you look at the dots on the board, the most dots out there are from Canada. And that's natural, I guess, from our geographic proximity, right, to the U.S. And so there's a need there, and I just wanted to make sure that need is met. And if people need my skills, they know that I exist, sure. And I can do it. So there you go.
Great stuff. Just to bring that board to life that Gilles mentioned, we've got a board right behind us here, which is a big world map, and it basically people come in and put a red dot on the board for countries that they pay outside of the U.S. Correct. And the Canadian... Canada rather has an awful lot of red dots. Yeah, so just to bring that bit to life, you can see it here. And actually, the UK has a lot of dots as well.
Absolutely, yeah. UK, Ireland has a lot of dots on it. But from a geographic perspective, it makes sense because a lot of US companies have interest in Canada, and if payroll is being seen as a back office functionality, say, oh, you don't need a payroll in Canada, let's move it to the US kind of thing, without moving the knowledge, without moving the expertise. They go through a few months of pay because their systems can handle it. But getting into the compliance at year end, no, we do not issue W-2s, we issue T4s. And there's a whole bunch of payroll taxes that need to be looked after. That the knowledge may not be there. And so you can get into a lot of trouble with a little knowledge.
Okay, you're clearly very much an expert on this side. So let's say I am a business listening to this podcast right now, and I do have a Canadian payroll.
Yep.
I wouldn't necessarily have known to come to you for that service. So how would a business or how would a payroll manager find Gilles Champagne if they needed your services?
Well, hopefully, if you are setting up a Canadian payroll or manage a Canadian payroll, you are linked to the Canadian Payroll Association. It is the number one, the only, voice of payroll in Canada. The CPA does not have an in-house consulting arm. They do have an info line that handles like 44,000 calls a year,
wow,
or inquiries a year. That's fine. You can always go to the Canada Revenue Agency. You can go to the Social Security Agency. Problem is getting an answer in writing you can land on or confide in. Right?
Sure.
So the CPA or the APA will, if you are interested in getting some kind of assistance with your setting up your Canadian payroll, we'll farm it out to a number of professionals that we have listed, and I'm one of them. And so you do get work thrown at you from through the association.
I imagine with the globalization of payrolls getting bigger and bigger, you're pretty busy right now.
It was a niche, like I said, a niche that I found was underserved, and that's proven correct. So yeah, so I do get, and I try not to do it all the time. I do try to. I'm at the point in my career where I try to bring it back a little bit.
Bit of work-life balance.
A little bit of work-life balance. So exactly.
Good stuff. Could they find you on LinkedIn as well?
Absolutely.
Great. I'll make sure I'll put a link in the profile so people can find Gilles' services if they need them. Quick advert break.
Einstein famously said that insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We believe it's time to try a new approach to recruitment. JGA Recruitment specialise in recruiting the top 15% of payroll and HR talent using innovative 24/7 attraction strategies that are proven to improve quality of hire, candidate retention and return on investment. De-risk your recruitment process today and hire better talent faster with JGA Recruitment. Visit jgarecruitment.com to find out more.
You may have picked up on the fact that Gilles' surname is Champagne.
Yes.
So you're not just all about you've got some French roots in there by the sounds of things.
Absolutely. Our family came over to Canada from France 13 generations ago.
My wife would be very impressed. She's a bit of a qualified sommelier, so I think she would swap surnames in a heartbeat for yours, Gilles. I'm not going to lie. So look, clearly very passionate about payroll.
Yes.
What are you excited about over the next 12, 24 months? What do you see happening or changing in the payroll industry?
There's a hope that people will realize that they need to develop their skills. Right now, if you have skills in multiple countries, multiple jurisdictions, you are elevating your possibility of really having a great career in global payroll. The global space is exploding.
Sure.
And we're finding that the skill sets to manage it aren't well met. And so an individual that wants it, that has a passion for payroll, who wants to expand their horizons, would do well in, even at the sessions here at Congress, just find out what's happening in the UK. We'll find out what's happening in France.
Sure.
Singapore is a big one. Australia is here as well. Make sure that you find out what's happening because your next employer could very well have payrolls in 12, 15, 50 countries. You're probably not going to get a person who knows 50 countries, but if you know the basics of where to go to get the information,
sure,
half the battle.
Sure. No, I think that's brilliantly put, and absolutely true. And we've got some great vendors here. I've spoken to several who actually support over 140 countries. So the expertise is here if you need to find it.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know much about payroll as a career choice in Canada, but I know certainly in the UK, and I understand from my chat in a different podcast with John Charleston that it's the same in the US, but we are struggling a little bit to get new millennials and other young professionals into the payroll industry. What's it looking like in Canada, and does the industry as a whole need to do more to encourage payroll as a career choice, or is Canada ahead of the curve in that side?
I don't say we're ahead of the curve, but we've tried to stay on top of the need by having a number of colleges and universities that now train through an approved course structure through the Canadian Payroll Association of what it means to be a certified professional in Canada. One of the very nice things that has happened is that payroll is now really recognized as a profession. There are 2 layers of certification that you need to do.
Great.
And employers are very much in sync with saying, if I'm going to hire a payroll professional, I want them to be certified. I don't want to be the company training them. I want them to be knowledgeable.
Sure.
Get your training before. Most employers will pay for it in Canada. That's just the social fabric of Canada. Get your certification. Your horizons will explode.
Great, and it's good to know that there are, countries out there really promoting payroll as a career choice, which I think we need more of that. In terms of technology, how do you see the landscape changing? And I've spoken before in previous podcasts about things like blockchain and artificial intelligence and chatbots, and in the UK we're talking a lot about robotic process automation. What are the big technological advancements that we're seeing in Canada at the moment? And I guess, how do you see the landscape changing from a tech perspective over the next 24 months?
We are not necessarily known as leaders in the HR payroll tech world.
Okay.
But one of the things that is happening is that we are going down the blockchain.
You are? Okay.
We are. There is a private organization that, I think if you look at the last 18 months, 24 months, there's been a massive amount of infrastructure being deployed for blockchain processing in Canada. We have the power, we've got everything that it needs to run. So one company has developed something that's quite interesting. They want to basically enable your personal identification to be managed through blockchain.
Wow, technology.
And the good thing is that the federal government is latching on, some of the provincial governments are latching on, and all the banks are latching on. So the requirement within maybe 18 to 24 months, they're going into pilot, I understand, early 2020. And what the requirement will be was that if you want to open a bank account, you are going to do that by basically enabling the bank to have access to your identity through blockchain. That's how you're going to certify that you are you.
Wow.
And it's novel. I think Estonia is the only other jurisdiction that has gone down that road so far. But our government has looked at it, and our federal government has looked at it and saying, this is interesting. It's a way of making sure that, you have more privacy. Privacy is a big deal.
Yeah.
And that you have more control. And if that comes to pass, we will be at the forefront of that part of technology. And then payroll cannot avoid but go down that path, because your identity within the taxation world with the federal government is based on us. It's based on payroll, right? We feed basically 60% of our federal government's income through payroll taxes, right? And so they can't ignore it. You basically are saying, if we're going to make sure that you are paying what you're doing, but you are who you are actually working legally in the country.
Sure.
A way to prove that will be through your identity management. That will be done through this. So we'll see where that actually ends up going.
Sounds exciting. It's certainly a different narrative in the UK. I can't see it taking off in the UK quite yet. I think maybe Canada will be ahead of the curve, certainly against the UK on that side for sure. So you've obviously been at Congress now. We're on day 2, day 3? Yeah, I'm not quite sure myself. There's been a lot of workshops taking place. Which has been your favourite or most memorable workshop during your course of time here so far?
I've been trying to focus on the technology sessions primarily. So I need to stay up in my line of work. I need to know what's going on in the world. And so I've been focusing on what's coming up, the whole, how are we going to get involved in the Internet of Things?
Yes.
How is payroll going to get involved with 5G? Mobile computing has come to payroll, but not in a big way.
Agreed.
It is there.
And it's coming.
It's not necessarily been adopted yet.
Sure.
A lot of software offerings have been adapted to it, but little adoption.
Sure.
And so I think in the next few years that will be where we go. Mobile computing being the big one. We are slaves to our iPhones and our iPads, and more we need timely information. If you have a very geographically dispersed workforce, it'll be even more important that they fill out or report time, job costing, whatever, in the minute as it's done.
Sure.
And so if they can do it on their iPhone, they can do it on their iPad, any mobile device which will take advantage of the new 5G technology, better, faster, more ubiquitous, is going to be good for us. We get better data quicker. That's what our world is about. we have to pay people on time, accurately, every time.
Perfectly put, and that's basically what the role of the payroll professional is, right? And it's using technology to make that more accessible and a bit easier and make our lives a little bit easier as well. Yep. This has been an absolute pleasure. We could probably talk about payroll tech and Canadian payroll all day long, but it's been really good for you to join me today. So thank you ever so much for joining me on the podcast. I guess the last question I'm going to leave really, because I think it's a good way to finish, is if you could sum up why you love payroll, why you're so passionate about payroll, why you've come all the way to the US to learn more about payroll, how do you sum that up? Can you sum it up?
Yes, in a sense, because Canada, US differ a little bit this way. We have about, from our last survey of the Canadian Payroll Association, roughly 44% of our population lives paycheck to paycheck. The APA, through their studies, say that from an American perspective, 78% live paycheck to paycheck.
Wow.
What we do is really, really important. Most families would be impacted severely if we did not get the money into their bank accounts when we say we would, in the amounts that they're promised. And so to our best reaction to all that is basically not hearing any complaints from the staff. No one ever calls payroll and says, gee, thank you for getting my pay into my bank account.
Absolutely right,
that doesn't happen. But to be able to say that, we have met the needs of the population, we are not the ones that are impacting their lives. They can go ahead, live their lives, do what they need to do their work without worrying about where their money's coming from, is just, it's a service. If you want to call it a public service, but it is just something that I feel very passionate about, that we need to do. We need to get more of. My son has just joined the payroll profession.
Excellent.
From a technology perspective.
Excellent.
But he's heard me and lived with my passion for payroll for 30 years, and so it's gratifying to see that he's going down that road.
What a fantastic way to finish. There you go. It's in the blood. It's in the blood. You heard it here first on the Payroll Podcast. Absolutely.
Champagne in his blood.
Champagne and payroll. One's through. It's been an absolute pleasure, Gilles. Thank you ever so much for joining me today on the Payroll Podcast. It's been fantastic, and I'll make sure there are links to your LinkedIn profile in the episode notes for those that, if you have a Canadian payroll issue or you have a Canadian payroll that you need to implement. I'll put the link in the episode notes. Check it out, and you can make sure that you get in touch with a genuine Canadian payroll expert right here. Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, and we'll speak to you all again soon.
Thank you, Nick.
You've been listening to the Payroll Podcast with Nick Day of JGA Recruitment, specialist payroll recruiters. If you would like to feature on a future podcast, please contact us. For a wealth of world-class payroll content, please visit us at jgarecruitment.com. See you next week.